On April 1st, 1899, President McKinley issued an executive order setting Fort Stanton aside for use by the United States Marine Hospital Service as a tuberculosis sanitarium. John Dower, who died on December 16, 1899, was the first tuberculosis victim to be buried in the Marine Hospital Service Cemetery at Fort Stanton. In 1902, the hospital service renamed as the Public Health and Marine Hospital Service. Later in 1912, the name was changed again to the U.S. Public Health Service Hospital. During this time, the Public Health Service Hospital operated the Fort Stanton Cemetery. There was at least 21 burials of U.S. military personnel, as evidenced by the presence of government-furnished military headstones. The earliest was William Jeffries, USMC private, who died on August 15, 1918. Established in 1855 as a military post and control the Mescalero Apache Indians, Fort Stanton may be one of the most intact 19th century military forts of all in America today. It is certainly one of the most impressive historic settings of any site in the southwest United States. Although the use of many military forts established during the Western expansion diminished by the turn of the century, Fort Stanton continued on to be a noble service to New Mexico and the nation well into the 20th century. In 1861, the fort was abandoned to Confederate forces in the stages of the American Civil War. The retreating forces tried to burn the fort, but the rainstorm extinguished their fire. The Confederates completed the destruction when they left after a month's occupation. The fort returned to the Union fold in 1862 under the command of the legendary Christopher Kit Carson. The fort was rebuilt after the war during the 1880s. Black soldiers from Fort Stanton helped pursue Apache bands led by Victorio and Geronimo. John Blackjack Pershing served 2 hours of duties at Fort Stanton in 1880s. After the closure of the Army post in Fort served as a merchant marine tuberculosis hospital and WW2 internee camp, a training school for the mentally disabled, and most recently as a low-security women's prison, hosted several juvenile drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs, and is currently the state monument and museum visited by tens of thousands of tourists each year. A very large oil painting inside the Catholic chapel at Fort Stanton historic site by German artist Hans Tilbar from a nearby internment once located at Fort Stanton painted the Savior image. Author James J. McBride says that Tilbar, who was among the German SS Columbus seamen who stayed at the internment camp between 1941 and 1945, located at former Civilian Conservation Corps site. While at nearby Fort Stanton Hospital, Tilbar visited the Catholic chapel, and today his work hangs in the chapel. The painting depicts Jesus walking on water and probably related to one of the miracles attributed to Jesus in the New Testament. German and Japanese internment. During the Great Depression, Fort Stanton was home to the CCC work camp, which later served as the internment site for German merchant seamen from the German luxury liner, the SSS Columbus, which was scuttled outside of New York to prevent its capture by the British. The German internees built a camp that included such amenities as gardens with fresh produce, a recreation hall, a swimming pool in which many Olympic competitions were held. Local population after the war was declared with Germany and Japan. The internment camp housed some German prisoners of war, as well as a few Japanese internees. It was used during early WW2 for several months as a refugees for a group of Japanese American families threatened by mobs in their hometowns. The history of Fort Stanton is of significance to the story of New Mexico and is extremely complex. Timothy Roberts, regional manager at Lincoln and Fort Stanton historical sites. Most people know the Fort Stanton was, of course, an army post, but fewer know that it was the United States government's very first federal facility dedicated to the treatment of tuberculosis. The Fort Stanton Sanitarium had major implications for the people on an economy of New Mexico. Selected for its dry climate, Fort Stanton served some 5,000 sailor patients between 1899 and 1953, 1,500 of whom were buried in the Maritime Cemetery on the hillside overlooking Fort Stanton. Legend states the black cavalrymen were dubbed Buffalo Soldiers by their Native American adversaries because of their toughness, dark skin, and hair texture. Nearly 4,000 Buffalo Soldiers served in 11 posts in New Mexico, protecting travelers to California and valuable trade routes along the Rio Grande. The first Buffalo Soldiers to serve in New Mexico arrived in 1866 when members of the 57th and 125th Infantry Regiments camped at Fort Sumner while en route south of Fort Stanton and Selden. Beginning in late 1875, the famed 9th Cavalry relocated their regimental headquarters to Fort Union, New Mexico. The Fort Stanton Museum, initially the museum's building was a soldier's barracks built in 1855, but it was converted to serve an administration building for the public health service during the hospital era. Today, your journey through the fascinating history of Fort Stanton begins at the museum, which features excellent exhibits and extraordinary videos and provides breathtaking images and interpretive content to bring the rich history and heritage of Fort Stanton to life. Greeting more than 20,000 annual visitors, the museum at Fort Stanton was restored through the federal grant called Save America's Treasures and by Fort Stanton Incorporated, an all-volunteer non-profit corporation 501c3 founded in 1997 to help preserve the national treasure and to seek its adaptive reconstructions and living history. You can see the museum and its museum's hours open Thursday through Monday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The museum is closed noon to 1 p.m. for staff lunch and sanitation and may be closed to bad weather. No admission fee, donations appreciated. You can contact them at 575-354-0341.